Let me say I appreciate the panel. We have made some enormous strides in our economic recovery since the financial meltdown and recession of starting in 2008. We've seen some robust job growth, declining unemployment, growing GDP, but there's still work to do. And in my mind, the focus on measures that we should be looking at are strengthening middle-class incomes, investing in our infrastructure, and improving educational opportunities. So with that in mind, most, I think, of members of this committee believe that there is a pressing need to reform and simplify our tax code. However, opinions begin to diverge when we are talking about what are the goals for reform, what they should be, and how exactly we go about accomplishing those goals. And I think the President made it pretty clear where he stands on this question, and I strongly agree with him that we need to be focused on measures to help middle-class families instead of keeping in place tax loopholes geared towards special interests with high-paid lobbyists. So along this prioritization, Dr. Wolfers, very simply, what is more beneficial to the economy and individual families? Measures targeted towards the middle class and households across the income spectrum, such as tax credits to help working parents afford child care, students afford college, or further tax breaks for those who are at the top of the bracket who don't need them, in many cases aren't asking for them?
I think my answer is that tax breaks and policies targeted towards the middle class are going to yield a much bigger dividend. I mean that in two respects. One is there's an emerging body of evidence that inequality may be an important force that is going to be a drag on our economy, and so we could ameliorate that directly if we can start to get things like make college available to much of the middle class. So it would be an important pressure for growth. And then there's another point. The other issue is, what's the point of having economic growth if it actually delivers nothing for most? And so to the extent that these policies could do that, I think it's worthwhile. I also think that there's some really simple stuff. When someone first explained to me what so-called stepped-up basis was, the trust fund loophole, the mind boggled, and I think that that would be true for not only most economists but also most of your constituents. The carried interest loophole as well. These are all loopholes which have basically no economics behind them and no economic benefit, so they potentially free up a whole bunch of money to do something far more useful.
So if we, in essence, help educate a workforce that the private sector needs in order to deal with the human capital requirements in the global economy, and at the same time help more middle-class families have greater resources to help educate that child and or to be able to get to work so they can have their child be taken care of without losing so much of their disposable income, they'll have more income to spend in our society, and that will help fuel our economy, would it not?
Absolutely so.
Now, let me ask Governor Engler and you as well about the importance to our economy of investing in our infrastructure, particularly at a time when interest rates are near historic lows and there is continued slack in the construction industry. Today, there's a report that came out in New Jersey, Mr. Chairman, that is led by a nonprofit transportation entity, and it said New Jersey's bad roads and bridges are costing individual drivers almost $2,000 and contribute to higher numbers of fatal crashes. And it goes on to talk about a whole host of elements. When we're thinking about this, we're talking about people getting to work, workforces getting to sales forces getting out there, being able to sell the products, being able to move our products to marketplace, to ports and whatnot. Can you talk about the importance of investments in infrastructure? Because we always look at this with a transportation trust fund that it continuously seems to be broke, and we do it in short-term entities instead of also looking at the investment and the ripple effect that that generates. Could you respond to that?
Well, I'm a believer in infrastructure, and I'm a believer in investing in infrastructure, and I think you have to sort of break it down. I think there's elements of infrastructure investment where you know, the user can pay, and there's a great return on investment to allow for that investment to be made up front and paid off over time. Examples of that, you know, you've certainly got, you know, everything from the air traffic control system to, I mentioned the electric grid earlier. There's tremendous upgrading that can be done, water systems, all of these kinds of things. Roads and bridges are harder. It's gotten harder to, insist upon a user pay approach because some vehicles don't pay traditional fuel taxes. The efficiency of the fleet is such today that we drive many more miles for census and taxes paid. So I think that's going to have to be adjusted over time. You've been fixing the trust fund holes with general fund borrowing. That's probably not sustainable. And we got a big hole coming up this spring again. One of the things that is driving all of America crazy is the inability to plan longer term for anything, whether it's tax provisions that expire. We had a code for 2 weeks, if we go back to December. Well, infrastructure is the same thing. A state, and especially a state, we got a few northerners around the table here, you can't build roads year-round in some parts of the country, so you need to be ready to go in the spring. If the trust fund isn't funded, and you can't budget your money accordingly, you underperform that way. So I think that there's, in this low interest rate environment, a tremendous opportunity to do projects, and many of them will have if you borrow money, you've got to pay it back. And I think many of them have a value proposition that allows that to take place. In other cases, there is public investment that's required. And I think it's not right to, if you've got a hole in the roof, you should fix it.
Senator, your time is up.